What's up, guys? I just went through the whole Reddit article and the Q&A session. So I'm going to tell you what I thought. I'm going to give you some speculation, which means it's just my opinion on certain things. There's nothing concrete. Uh, so anyway, let me just get into it. I wrote down a few of the main points that I got as far as information. There's not a lot there because, to be honest, 80% of this Q&A was mostly repetitive questions, and I'm going to get into that in a second. But most of the answers were no, but we're thinking about this in the future. So most being that it was most of that was that kind of, you were getting those answers. It didn't feel like we were learning much, and I do appreciate the communication, but I honestly I think I would have held off on doing this now. Maybe wait a while longer when you could actually reveal something, right? I wasn't expecting big information, but I was expecting a little more information. At the end of the day, I'm not that surprised. It pretty much went the way I was expecting. So the first thing I'm gonna get into is I'm really this stuff really irks me, and it has to do with the community, and a lot of people keep asking the same questions about things that don't really add anything to the game. They're not. It's just things like, are you gonna have fantasy drivers and tracks? Um, are you going to have another series? These things don't add anything real substantial to these games. You can add a series, it doesn't really change much. Who cares about fantasy drivers and fantasy tracks? Okay, you know what, that would be cool, but that's not on my top list of priorities, to be honest with you. That to me is something that can wait down the line, when once you have a fully fleshed out game and you have most of the main things people have been waiting for all these years, then you could start thinking of expanding and adding this stuff. But there's so much repetitive. And then this last question, which really pisses me off, because there's actually people with this attitude. They're like, you owe us 2020 DLC, and uh, are we going to get compensation somehow? Compensation for what? The paid DLC was for September, October, November, December. We got all of that. Those paint schemes, the spotter packs, the challenges, and a couple of templates, pretty much. That was bought and paid for, and they delivered that. This whole 2020 DLC thing was an addition. It wasn't something people paid for, and these people have a decision to make. And considering the way things have turned out, which seem like a lot of it felt abrupt, all these changes, right? It's something they have to deal with. They got to restructure, they got to hire people, they got to make plans. You want them, on top of that, to spend time and resources on 2020 DLC for NASCAR Heat 4, something that really isn't going to elevate the experience that much. Really, it's not that important. But worst of all, they're acting like you owe us something. We got to have some kind of compensation. I These people are out of their minds. That's just the way I feel about it. Some of you guys may not like that I'm saying that, but it is what it is. You got your DLC, paid DLC. That they delivered that. Stop asking for stupid shit that doesn't really elevate the game. There's not a lot of time to work on these games, and you want them to waste time on bullshit. And I've always said this every year. I say the same thing. Be careful what you ask for. because you might get it. I said the same thing about uh, split screen multiplayer that people were crying about for years. And finally, they delivered it. They gave it. I've never heard anything about that, like from anybody. So I might be wrong. Some of you guys may be enjoying the shit out of it. But if I have to, if I had to guess, I would say it can't be more than a handful of people that are even using that split screen. Most people play online or offline career. I don't see this big market for split screen multiplayer. Now, I'm only bringing it up to say that it was something that people kept asking for, and I never really thought it was that important. And guess what? They decided to give it to you. Now, I don't know how much time and resources went into that. The point is that some did. They did spend time on it. They did, whatever it was, and they gave it to you. So I always tell people, be careful what you ask for, because you should be asking for the most important things. And I know I don't have all the answers, and I'm not here to decide what's the most important for everybody. I'm only speaking for myself, but from what I see, a lot of people agree with me. The career mode is the most important thing. And yeah, online multiplayer needs work as well, right? You got to get the online to run smoother. These servers need a lot of work. And I've talked about that. The point is that those are the things that should be up top. And then you want to talk about adding a series or uh, adding the ability to create custom tracks or have historic racetracks. That's great for later. Let's get the game where it's supposed to be first, not where you still have a game that's not fully fleshed out. It's missing a lot of things. It feels bare bones. But then you want them to work on stupid shit like let's add another series. For what? They added a dirt series, and I'm sure some people enjoy it, but really, does the game feel like it's night and day improved because of that? No. The biggest improvements come through career mode and adding more in that area. We don't have any presentation, any of that stuff, and yet you have people whining and crying about add another series or why aren't we getting this updated 2020? What? It's just maybe paint schemes and what a roster update and then a new updated schedule. It's not important. And then you gotta take into account the fact that they don't have a lot of time. They want to work on this next game, and I'm going to talk about something else that just adds more to it in a second. But I gotta call out the community. You guys gotta figure out what's most important to you. Now, if that is what's most important to you, then I don't want to hear anybody complain about why these games feel bare bones or there's so much missing, and you're wondering why this game isn't as good as a 15-year-old game like NASCAR Thunder 2004 because you're asking for stupid shit. That's why. So I just had to get that off my chest. So let's get to the things that we did learn, right? So, like I said, most of it was answering stupid questions like this. I can't tell you how many times they asked these: Are you going to add a series? Are you going to, or what's up with the 2020 DLC? They already told you. We're moving forward. We're not focusing anymore on this game. You got what you paid for in terms of DLC. So, and I actually like that. I don't want them wasting time on dumb shit. So that's it. So the things that I did write down, okay, so I did catch some things that were interesting, that were information, right? One thing, it's the same four series. I wrote that down. I just talked about that. Okay, so they're not adding a series. It's going to be the same four series. There's no fantasy tracks, drivers, etc. Maybe in the future, they said, right? One thing they did bring up was stats. They are working on the stats. Maybe they're just going to expand on it, do a better job with the layout. That's great. That's always been an issue with these games. But that's not really something that I would consider that's gonna like be game changing. Just that alone, you know. But it's something, right? That's kind of confirmed. They talked about releasing the game earlier. Okay. Now that's the other thing that I was talking about earlier. So it's possible that NASCAR Heat 5 is going to get released earlier. They're looking into that. So a lot of people they like hearing that, and it sounds good on one side, but on the other side, it looks to me like that's even less development time for the next game. So realistically, I'm looking at I don't know when it's going to be released, but it's going to be sooner. That means to, to expect less, right? So honestly, I'm going to be honest with you guys. Because of all the changes happening at the company and all this restructuring and looking to the future, right? There is a reality that at some point we have to come to, or at least I have, right? As much as I want to see a lot of the things I've been fighting for in the next game, there is a reality that I've come to accept. It's not going to happen this next game. I might be wrong. This is just speculation. They haven't revealed anything substantial. But if the game is going to come out earlier and they're looking to the future, judging from a lot of these answers, it's a lot of, down the line. Somebody asked about paint booth. Same thing. We're looking into it down the line. We're not getting a paint booth in NASCAR Heat 5. That being said, before people panic, I still think that the current customization has potential. If you went in there and you actually added stuff, gave us more options, added a lot more templates, gave us some decent number fonts, more variety, give us more options, let us color the wheels any color we want, for instance, add a lot more templates. That's vital. Add more customization options to the fire suits. There's things you can do with the current system if you went in there and actually worked on it without building a whole new paint booth, right? As a stopgap, okay? I could live with that for one game, and then we'll talk about the future in a second. So just because we're not getting a paint booth doesn't mean they can't go in and really improve that. That's possible, and I'm hoping that's what they do. But it does sound to me like we're not getting a paint booth, and that's just speculation. But so that's another thing. But releasing the game earlier, they're looking into it. They didn't reveal a date. There's a lot they can't talk about yet, but that's less development time. So I honestly just would not expect a lot. And here's the last thing I'm going to talk about. They talked about next gen consoles. They are planning for that, which they should, and I'm glad to hear. And they mentioned something that's going to make a lot of you guys happy. I never thought this was that big of a problem, and I've talked about this in the past, but the game engine. Everybody hates the Unity engine. Well, this is going to be the last game that's going to use the Unity engine. They're going to they're going to start fresh with the next gen. And that means redoing everything from the ground up, brand new game with a brand new engine. Okay, so that's good in a lot of ways, but you know, it creates a whole new expectation, and this is why I'm thinking NASCAR Heat 5 is just going to be a holdover. So it's going to be uh, what we saw with NASCAR 15. Those of you who remember Technics, there was NASCAR 14, and then they released the last game 15, which was published under Dusenberry Martin, who eventually became 704 Games. So basically, it was the same game. They just updated rosters, paint schemes, and made a couple of tiny changes and released it. So that is what you call a holdover. And I think that this one may be a holdover. NASCAR Heat 5, I think, is going to be NASCAR Heat 4 with some tweaks. They're going to polish a few things, maybe add a couple of things. They talked about the stats, and they have mentioned they're looking at the AI, the physics, and all that. So they're going to tweak it up a little bit. And just updating, everything. Also, you got the next gen cars for in 2021, so they got a plan for all this. So I know a lot of people going to be disappointed to think, right? And I could be wrong. This is just what I'm thinking. Just looking at all this stuff, I'm thinking that's where they're going. And honestly, I'm not that upset. I'm not really disappointed. I look at the reality of it and I say, with all the changes happening, the restructuring, they're trying to set themselves up for the future. Some sacrifice has to be made. It's not magic. And I've told you guys, these yearly development cycles is not a lot of time to really do something big with these games. So if they took NASCAR Heat 5 and they release it in September again and they take more time with it, that's actually less time for the next gen. I don't know if they have next gen developer kits. Like most big developers have them. They're already working on stuff. And my hope would be is that they have developer kits already and that maybe they've already started laying the groundwork for the next gen. That would be my hope. Is that the case? Probably not. But as a developer, if I was in charge, that's kind of where I would be going with this. Um, Someone also asked them about the release yearly release business model, which I always talk about, and they pretty much actually mentioned that they're looking at things. That doesn't really mean much, but I was a little surprised. I thought they would just say, no, we're going to keep doing this yearly thing. That doesn't mean they're not, but they kind of left that up in the air. And I do think that it just seems that they're considering these things, right? Um, so it's early, and they're eventually going to release more information about this next game. And maybe when they do, I'll change my tune, right? I can only speculate on what little we know. But considering all the stuff happening at the company, the restructuring, what they're trying to do, my guess is that NASCAR Heat 5 is going to be a lot like NASCAR Heat 4, and they're going to polish it up, make a few, add a couple, sprinkle in a few things, who knows. And then they're just going to jump on the next game. So I wouldn't mind that if they're all in and they're really going to release something spectacular for next gen. Because here's the problem, and I want to really make this case clear. They can't afford to, when they release the next build of the game, or the whole new rebuild for the next gen, they can't afford to release another Heat Evolution. What I mean is a bare bones game that's just something that's like, here's the first one, we're going to build on this. So we know you're disappointed with this product, but stick with us and we're going to get better and better. You can't do that again. That is going to be a massive problem that I don't think they'll ever recover from, because I guarantee you, you're going to lose half your audience, your consumer base, because a lot of us we stuck through the whole Eutechnics thing, right? Every year we were promised something better. It never happened. They folded. Along came 704. They released Heat Evolution, a bare bones demo, pretty much. Had absolutely nothing. And one of the first complaints people had was, there's no paint booth. When are we getting a paint booth? And the answer was, maybe in the future. And here we are, 4 games later, no paint booth, no caution replays, no presentation, no, all the things we've been talking about. So they have made substantial improvements to their credit, but you can't expect people to go through this cycle again of getting games that don't meet expectations and then giving them incremental improvements, baby steps, and asking them to stick with you and support you for the long haul. It's very important that when the next gen game comes out, whenever that is, that it's a fully fleshed out game. That it's something like you see with Formula One series with Codemasters or with the NBA 2K series in terms of presentation and narrative, a fully fleshed out career, deep, immersive, lots of detail. That's important. So you can't do that, start from like down here again. You got to come out strong. It's for the next gen. There's going to be a whole new game engine. So everybody could finally stop bashing the Unity engine and blaming the engine for everything. So that's what I'm pretty much getting the feel of right now. NASCAR Heat 5, if I'm guessing, is going to be a holdover. So they'll update some stuff, they'll give it a little polish, they'll tweak a few things, and they'll probably just release it early and go immediately to work on the next game for the next console, which is going to be a ground up game with a new engine and all that. And the more time they could spend on that, the better. So if that's what they're planning to do, I support it. And I'm okay with a NASCAR Heat 5 holdover. Because at some point, a sacrifice has to be made. You can't get everything. It's just not going to happen. And it would be difficult for EA or some other big developer with lots of resources to do in a short span. So could you imagine how hard it would be for a much smaller developer that's still trying to uh, just lay the foundation for the company? It's a lot. So I'm not making excuses. I'm dealing with reality. That's just the reality of what it is. And if you're asking me, do I prefer that they take much longer with Heat 5 and deliver, a much better product? I don't know. I think I would rather just let's get this over with. Uh, Let this be a holdover if that's what it takes. But you better deliver a fully fleshed out game for the next gen that everyone is happy with, and they don't walk away saying, "Why is there no customization? Why is there no paint booth? Where's the presentation?" You can't afford to do that again, especially from the ground up. So it's early. There's a lot we don't know, and it could be, who knows? Maybe they come out later and say, no, this, and this is what we're doing with NASCAR Heat 5. And maybe we're surprised and we say, wow, that's a lot more than I thought. But I'm being realistic. And let's be real. It feels like they got a late jump on development for NASCAR Heat 5 because of all the issues in the company. And then they're talking about releasing it earlier, which I support because I do think that the best time to release a NASCAR game is much earlier, preferably the week of the Daytona 500, right? That's when the NASCAR season starts. That's when you're going to get the most marketing hype. And that's when people really, the game should coincide with the season. So that would be my preference. But to get to that point, we're going to go through a kind of a rough patch right now. So I do think that NASCAR Heat 5 is possibly going to be like NASCAR Heat 15 was to 14. Those are my thoughts. I'm curious to know what you guys think on that front. And again, it's just speculation, but it's starting to feel like that. Um, it is what it is. And I'm at a point where if we have to sacrifice that one title as a quick holdover, something to get us by, and then they could immediately start working on the next game, which will be next gen, and really get everything, because it's going to be a ground up build. That's going to require the most work. Then I want them to have the most amount of time and resources allocated to that as possible. And maybe releasing NASCAR Heat 5 sooner, that means they can start work sooner on the next game. So that's pretty much it. And all right, I look forward to your thoughts later.